warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we're here with Sister Afeefa Syeed from Washington, D.C. She started a school 20 years ago that focuses on peace education and mindful practices. We will have a conversation with her today about technology use and children. So let's start by acknowledging the fact that my kids were out here disturbing our talk because they wanted to use my phone. So I feel that I think it's becoming a common issue with parents like me, having kids nowadays, growing up with technology, growing up with gadgets, and them being somewhat addicted to phones and just gadgets in general. What is your opinion on that, and or more like, what is your advice for parents, for concerned parents like me, and how should we handle the issue?
So that's a great question in terms of, what's the role of technology, what's the use of technology, and like you're saying about, it's not a theoretical conversation anymore. It's obviously, as part of our daily lives, in terms of how technology is used. I think before we really talk about children and technology and trying to keep them from it, we really have to take a step back and think about what they are seeing first. Now, we have to remember that we have a generation, almost a generation, I would say a generation and a half at this point, that has only known technology in their lives. So you have, your children who have not seen life without a phone or seen life without some sort of technology. So for us to kind of put the burden on our children to the extent that, why can't we get them off the technology? Part of it, we have to take the step and back and think about, well, what is it that we are doing with technology, with devices and so on. So I would think that really our approach has to be first thinking about our mindful interaction with technology. And really it means, how much are we, take an inventory. How much are we using our phones on a day-to-day basis? And sometimes it's, how many hours? But it's also to what intensity. Because somebody will tell me, I'm just picking it up to check something, right? It's not that often. But then that could add up. And the question is, can we put ourselves in the eyes of somebody that's watching us? So I was joking the other day when somebody was coming in and telling me, what can we do about technology with our children, using her hands to gesture like this? And while she's asking me, she's got a phone in her hand, right? And she's saying, what can we do to stop how much they're using technology? So I just, we said, okay, let's just take a minute. What are you doing with it? Literally, what do you have in your hand? And the inventory part of it is to take us, look at your day. When is it being used? And I know, the argument is many times it's a very valid one. I need it, for work. And I know here in Malaysia and anywhere actually that you go, people will say, my work doesn't stop, I have to be involved. But there are also companies now that, because they've recognized this concern for society, have said they will ask employees not to check their mail after a certain time, right? So addressing each sort of, if you call it an excuse. If the excuse is, well, I have to check it for work, well, let's figure, can we do something about that? I have to check it because I have family. Let's look at each reason that we check it. And part of that checklist is to see how are we using these devices mindfully. Yeah. I was talking to a teenager yesterday who said, I don't even post that much, but I check things. So she's spending a lot of time not actually producing, not actually, taking her Instagram selfies. She's not doing any of that, yeah. But she's spending a lot of time on in other people's lives. Yeah. But in that exercise, she was able to kind of identify what she uses it for. So I would say let's spend some time on that. And I would also think there is a lot of, I would say chatter out there about what technology is doing to us, even physically. And it is true. I mean, it's true in terms of our posture. It's true in terms of, I was thinking about it because we don't even, our hands, the way we use our hands now. Some people talk about, the wrist and the thumb, and that we're going to be evolving into some creatures that have different kinds of fingers even. But I mean, before we get too exaggerated, just think about it in your own life, and think about how that affects you.
You know, talking about the finger thing, it just came to my mind that my daughter has this weird finger thing that she does. And I am totally confident that it's because of the phone, usage of the phone. She does a lot of drawings and that's another reason why I don't really take away the phone from her too much, because she does other things that I feel that is positive, and not because she's not really on the YouTube watching YouTube videos. She's actually drawing, and that's one thing that she loves doing, whether it be with a pen or on the phone. So she does animations. So I don't want to stop that from her, but I've noticed that. I've noticed the finger thing going, just randomly when she's eating or something, she's taking a bite and she's like, doing that kind of. So that kind of thing scares me. So I don't know how far to take it, or how, like you said, or do we stop it straight away because they don't know a life without gadgets. And now we are teaching them, okay, you can actually animate on your iPad, so you can do this. It's amazing. You're 9 and you can do this, and upload it on YouTube, and that kind of.
That's a really good point, because a lot of people, again, we talk about arguments for or against and excuses, and one of them is, but my child, and let's go back to us too, right? We're also saying, but we are using it for things that are, either replacing what we would do otherwise, so then it's easier because now you don't have to worry about carrying around a pencil and a pen and a notebook and a book. You have it easier, right? So yes, that's true, that it's simplified our life in many ways, right? And you just pick it up and you use it for something. But I think what we're looking at more and more is whether it's science-related or society-based, just information and feedback but is it that we are replacing those activities with phone-based or device-based activities? Are we getting the same out of it, right? And of course, you can say that you are creating a YouTube or a Instagram or whatever it is, a story, and you're putting the same thought and process into that you would be writing a book, right? To some extent, it's true. And if it's, transferable, it's true. And I think that is a very big thing, that if we are using technology less as consumers and more as producers, that in itself is a positive, right? Because then we are using our ideas and our mind and creativity. So that's important. But I think what it gets a little fuzzy is where there's a full replacement, and then we don't understand, and this is what we need to all kind of research a little bit more, is by using it in technology form, whether it's drawing or whatever, is it somehow different than using it in a non-technology form in terms of brain development and so on. And I think studies are showing more and more now, especially in schools that are using it, that there is a difference in, for example, if you read from a book as opposed to reading on a screen, right? And now screens are starting to adapt so that they look more like a book, right? The backlighting Kindle, and so on. Exactly, the Kindles. But ultimately, is there something, and so some people will be anecdotal, I love the feel of a book, right? But when you say that, people think, well, that's not hard science, that's just how you feel about it. But is there something about using a different kind of technology? So I think that's something we need to explore, is what are the differences in these usages, and then ultimately what are they being used for? So I think in the sense of, as parents, we want our children to have access to the best of everything. That's kind of, our children are a trust to us, or amana, so we want them to have a best of everything. So we think, well, here is, a great program for them to use. Of course, as the kids get older, you think, I want them to learn more. So the way to learn is to be on this app, right? And so we must have these apps. So then I would take a kind of another pause, and this is what I'm really advocating for, just being mindful across this whole discussion about technology. So the second part, I would say, take a pause and say, when we try to measure what we want our children to have, so we want them to succeed, we want them to be the best at something, and so on. So we take that and say, well, what does that mean? And having something like immersion in technology for the sake of getting them to a better, whatever it is it worth it, right? If we already understand that maybe they're not, maybe what they're actually changing in some way that is fundamental, are we taking them to another place that is ultimately not succeeding in a way that we define success as far as a holistic person? Maybe they're able to do a function in some way because they've figured that out. Maybe they're even better at math. Maybe they're better at whatever because they're using those, but is it ultimately what we're concerned about? And I think at this juncture too, I think about when we go back to the very basis of our parenting, right, which is also connected to who we are as individuals, which is the fitra. And I'm very concerned about kind of taking spirituality out of the conversation. We start talking about technology and then suddenly it becomes apps and devices, but coming back to the sense of, okay, as parents, we are given an amana, which is a trust, and we're looking at that fitra, which is our natural disposition that children are born with. And that natural disposition has some remarkable characteristics. One of them is natural discovery. Children naturally want to go and explore things, right? And so if you give them an environment and make it safe for them to explore, but say, go figure things out. And in their physical world, they will naturally do that. If they're given an alternative to that, which sort of limits that space, then they will eventually go to that because that's what you're giving them. So giving them an open space to discover, to explore, and to sort of make mistakes and mess up a little bit, literally make a mess or do something they shouldn't have and then learn from it, that's important. And sometimes I do feel that technology in some ways, whether it's programs or whatever, kind of defines that confines that space more. Even though, you could say it's contradictory because you can go online and bump into all sorts of things, but if you're just talking about young children, you're talking about, giving them pieces of technology, sometimes those pieces are restricted. So I would say I'm concerned about it affecting their natural curiosity. The other part of it is also, the fitra part of it is this natural inclination towards being kind and being connected to each other. That really is something we're born with. And that connectivity means that you see somebody and you naturally want to sort of be with them. As a child, you have a natural curiosity about that person. And that comes from a kindness that, again, if you take that away and say, you know what, here's something for you to focus on. We don't want to bother people. And so you'll see in restaurants, and I see it all the time, people are on their little things, and the parents say, I have to give it to them because my child will be wandering about. Well, this wandering about, of course, it's not, we're not trying to be unsafe, but at the same time, this wandering about piece is this natural curiosity. It is actually wanting to connect with other people. And then I think the last part on that I'm thinking about more and more is it also takes away that responsibility we have of helping a child learn manners, which is the essence of parenting, and it's the essence of who we are as human beings. And of course, we don't mean manners by rules and things, right? It's adab. It's the way that we connect with each other and learning how to look a person in the eye, right, as the Prophet taught us, about being fully present with the person you're with, even when you're talking, when you're facing them. You don't even, talk from away. You talk face to face, subhanAllah. And that's something that the Prophet showed us in his example. But now you have us, first of all, as adults, and then our children watching it, not just even on our devices, but disconnected from who's around us, right? And we've all walked into a coffee shop and everybody is in a coffee shop, in a shared space, but in their own world, right? And I even have people that have told me they're in their space and they've got their headphones, so they can't hear anybody, they don't want to be bothered, and then if they are bothered, they get upset. Why am I being bothered? Well, you're in a public space. And the whole point of being together in a space is to not necessarily, be bothered in a negative way, but to interact. But we've kind of toned that down, but then our children aren't even seeing it or learning it as far as manners of interaction. So I am, I'm concerned about if we just talk about how to break down what technology is doing, the impact of technology on our children, and then taking that spiritual aspect and really just the human nature part of it. I mean, it's great that people are online getting to know each other and meeting each other, right? And it's beautiful because I can connect now to friends that I've had, 15, 20 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. But for the children, for that age group, I think that piece is going to be detrimental.
It's funny that you mentioned about the meeting online and communicating online, because I grew up with chat rooms,
right?
IRC, ICQ, and we met strangers.
Yes.
And the thing is, when we meet online, we chat, we're totally different people.
Yes.
And then you meet the person, for example, my husband, who is a total introvert.
Right.
So when I was communicating with him online, it's not to say that he's totally a different person, but he communicated better.
Right.
So I find that communication with my husband, even up to now, it's easier via WhatsApp. We understand each other clearer via WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that? Coming to more, not just focusing on the kids and gadgets now, it's focusing on adults and gadgets.
And relationships. And how we build them.
Yes.
So, and I think that's a great example of, how technology can be a positive force in many people's lives. For example, being shy or being introvert or whatever. I mean, my youngest son, Hamza, born an introvert, very clearly an introvert, and so on. But then he found, online, he could do really interesting things, and people were responding to him. And I think that's a big piece of it, is that somebody that's an introvert won't have the same engagement, but also won't get the same, recognition because they're not out there. But now they're getting the recognition. And so Hamza was excited to show his work, to show his art, because he was a comic artist and so on, and get people to respond to that, right? So there's that positive, which means it gives people that space to do that.
Yeah.
And to the extent that people will say, look, I am like this online, I'm not like this in reality, and be authentic about it, which is fine because it's a tool.
Yeah.
But we're looking at what's it doing to us, as a society.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say, we still communicate better in a text form than we do otherwise. So, but you've figured that out, right? And you have obviously a loving relationship where you figured out a lot of these different pieces, and you also know how to acknowledge each other and so on. But the thing is just that then in that case, what I would think through is, if we're talking about children, we're going back to that, or ourselves. How do we teach ourselves, right? What is the etiquette then for online, getting to know each other? And also, what are the expectations? Just like when we teach our children, for example, don't just go talk to a stranger and just be totally open in real life. We also need to figure that out online. And now, this much more profound, because now you're in a whole world of strangers, right? Whether it's for children to be acknowledging that and give them very proper instructions. And as they get older, we're very explicit about it. When we do a training for students at our school, where we are very explicit about, if you do this and this is what the consequence of it is. If you say, I'm going to have a party at my house, right, and you give your address, 800 people will show up, right? And this is an example that's used by the cybersecurity people, and they say, 800 people show up at a house. Well, how are you going to deal with that?
Yeah.
Or we have a lot of young people say, oh, it's Snapchat, so it disappears, and so on. Well, we have to educate them and say, actually, nothing disappears.
Yes.
Nothing disappears. Even if you're in silent mode or whatever you want to call it, even with Snapchat, it's going to reappear somewhere, and it is in somebody's inbox somewhere, or people take a screenshot. There's always a way that an online situation is going to be recorded.
Well, I think we are coming to an end, and I thank you so much for having this discussion with me. Obviously, it's worked out very well for me, and alhamdulillah, and thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad we had this conversation.